So we're on, I don't even know what episode this is now. I haven't done one of these in like 6 months. But I have been wanting to talk to both of you guys for quite a while. Pete, you and I have been back and forth about the idea of doing a podcast for a minute, so I'm glad we got it lined up. Lindsay, I'm super glad you're here as well. Can you let the listeners know a little bit about who you are, your company, and some of your kind of your specialties?
Yeah, I'm Pete.
I'm Lindsay.
And we run, ferment, and operate Harvest Roots Ferments in Birmingham, Alabama. We specialize in kombucha that tastes really good. And we also make a line of eccentric and creative pickles and krauts and kimchis.
What are like some of your big sellers for your, both in the kombucha line and in the kind of the food and pickle line?
The pickle line, I would say we call them our Solstice Pickles, and we call them that because here in Alabama, our cucumber season gets started pretty early, and we release our fermented cucumber pickles around the solstice every year. It just happens to be when, I don't know, every year it just seems to happen around that date. So we call them our Solstice Pickles, and it's a naturally fermented pickle just using salt, a saltwater brine, and microbes. I do not think we can make enough of those.
We also have been working with that farm this is the 5th or 6th year that we've been growing with that farm, a specific variety, a specific length, a specific harvest window, and a specific weight each batch delivered to our space so that we don't have excess. So that's been a really special process. For kombucha, I feel like the first flavor we ever released was one that Lindsay came up with, which is our elderberry and lemongrass kombucha. And that one's definitely always a bestseller. And then very recently, we released this kombucha called Star Stuff, and it's a dry hopped kombucha. So it's our really delicate, like really floral kombucha, which for Harvest Roots kombucha, for your viewers, we don't make an acetic, a vinegary kind of kombucha. We have a balanced acid profile that engages a lactic quality, a citric quality, a really delicate tea flavor, and the acetic acid is important in the fermentation process to digest ethanol. But with the amount of sugar that we start with, there isn't much alcohol production to digest in the first place. So over the years, I'm drinking kombucha as we speak.
Well, and you were saying too that Star Stuff is a dry hopped kombucha. So it's
I got carried away.
It's just our base tea with Galaxy.
Yeah, so we dry hop with Galaxy hops, Citra, and Mosaic. So I wanted to hype on the train, or hop on the hype train, that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those hops are going to have like a sexy name for marketing purposes, but also provide really good flavor. I know you guys wouldn't just throw any old hops into your stuff, so
yeah,
just for the hype.
I'm ready for the aged hops, though, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think I know there's been some experiments. I think people like Benedict are doing experiments with cider using an aged hop tea that the Brett will basically. The word biotransform, I know we'll get in trouble for using that because it's not probably accurate, or it's too widely accurate. It's a broad umbrella term, but the point is that the Brettanomyces reaction with the beta acids, I believe, in aged hops give it that like signature funk you get in like goose, not the lactic part of it, but the more Brett forward. So it'd be cool for you guys to try to do like a aged hop kombucha.
Yeah, we're ready to blow up borders. I mean, I think that beverage is an interesting place. We both think it's an interesting place because I think there's good beverage and then there's just stuff that isn't delicious. And I think if it's delicious, it's interesting. And, I think that's sort of where we need to come at kombucha with that kind of idea, because it's a product that has a lot of lore. It has a lot of misconceptions. Also, it's a really good lesson not to drink kombucha during a podcast interview, because I'm just like burping the whole time.
Maybe because you drink 24 ounces really fast.
I did. That is true.
Will it make you feel better if we start drinking beverages so we might be burping too?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tamara, by the way, this is the first time Tamara's been on the podcast, I think.
Yeah.
A cameo on Aiden's.
No, I don't think I was here.
Yeah, so first, see, Pete is shaking his head because he knows he listens to the podcast. So I think this is your first appearance. Everybody, this is my wife, Tamara.
Hi, y'all.
And I'm making her a beer mosa with our local Pilsner Trumer Pils. And I'm putting it into a glass I bought her for birthday or Christmas.
That one's Terrence, but I'll drink out
No,
of that.
I didn't assign any specific glass. I got her and her twin sister a set of glasses, and which one is no one glass was assigned to the other, but there's a female stripper and a male stripper glass.
Hell yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so we'll do that, and then I'm drinking Hen House Frozen Envelope IPA. It's part of their conspiracy theory line of IPAs. So
that's
hopefully
nice.
This will give us some burps, and you won't feel so self-conscious.
That was, I guess that I was getting on a soapbox about stuff, but
about good kombucha and misconceptions.
I mean, to be honest, yeah. I mean, even with the homies, I got integrated with the beer community because I'm passionate about making homebrewing at home, but also because of the sort of knowledge and microbiology as well as equipment and infrastructure that I could bring to the table with. Damn, that looks good. That beer roast.
I know. It's like we need to drink out of these glasses with the.
This is just hazy good. IPA, right?
That's so good.
So yeah, you bring in a different set of knowledge to the mixed culture community.
Well, I was suggesting that I was actually, I don't know. Did you say bringing knowledge?
I think you are. You're not just stealing it.
Okay, I believe in sure, the health of the soil. For sure. But I felt very fortunate that I'm one of maybe 2 or 3 kombucha brewers and milked a forklift. That's a privilege in itself. But anyways, that was a really cool, positive thing for our company, and
it's interesting because we were teaching a workshop a couple of months ago, and I realized in talking, I was to our students, I was like, kombucha is a really old practice, just like alcohol, but it's such a new industry. We only recently started commercializing it. What is it? GT's just celebrated his
25th.
Was it 25?
It's not 50.
It's not 50, but I thought it was 15.
No, it was 20 or 25.
What'd you say?
I was saying, point is, it's a low. It's not multiple hundreds of years of commercialized production like beer.
Exactly. I had never heard of kombucha until I went to culinary school, and it wasn't even from a teacher. It's from the woman who ran our student services, and she also taught free yoga on campus. So she actually gave me some of kombucha that she made at home.
Did you like it?
I loved it. Yeah,
that's cool.
Cool.
The first time I tried kombucha, I was like, what the fuck is this? This is disgusting. And then I was at Whole Foods again a couple of weeks later, and I was like, oh, I sort of want to buy it again. Why? Yeah,
that's often many people's introduction to sour beer, my own included. I remember the first time I had a goose, it was a Dre-Fontaine Gold Blend, and it was disgusting at the time in my book. I was like, why does and my best friend Bobby, who works at Lagunitas, will never let me live it down because he gave it to me, and he was saying it was had oak and minerality and all this stuff, and I was like, it tastes like Parmesan and feet. I'm sorry.
I had I embarrassed myself by one time by saying, I don't know, actually, I sort of, it's like half true, half false of a feeling for me now. But the first time I had Blackberry Farm Saison, I just like didn't get it, you know, like, and I was telling my Cicerone friend or whatever, I was like, I'd rather have a Bell's Two Hearted than this Blackberry Farm Saison. But it's like,
yeah, but you know what? Bell's Two Hearted is delicious. So
exactly. Whatever. I wasn't that far off. You know, I'm like very loyal to SNPA, like very, very loyal. So I think for us, like, you know, I think that kombucha is just like a really interesting, we call it a mixed culture soda, a non-alcoholic mixed culture soda. It's like super engaging to us, and it's taken us a bit to get our culture and to get our knowledge in a place where we can really feel like more open to exploring in kombucha, and to sort of free ourselves of like the chains of precedent, you know, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course there are traditions, and there's all these things that there's like little nuggets of wisdom based on decades or centuries of practice. But as we are learning more, there's things that can be thrown away as well. So it's making sure to like not be stifled creatively by dogma.
Yeah,
I think Noma benefited everything like greatly in that reason. You know, it's like, yeah, great. Like we're feeling very validated. Like Noma, you know, the best restaurant in the world is making kombucha, and in the way that we've been trying to illustrate or talk about it, not that we're making kombucha like Noma, but like that this idea of what kombucha can be, they helped us in the dialogue. Like it's a interesting beverage.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see the future of kombucha, because right now there are a lot of different brewing techniques, a lot of different carbonation techniques, a lot of different flavoring techniques, and right now it's just all umbrellaed as one type of product. But I am curious, just after, you know, I only know a little bit about the beer world, but like, will kombucha become diversified, and will there be names for different styles of the fermentations or not, you know? But, you know, there are people that are doing long fermentations, there are people that are doing incredibly short fermentations with like blending with a lot of acid, and there's a lot of different styles happening. And I think the industry of kombucha wants to sort of label it as one thing and define it as one thing, but I'm just curious if that'll actually happen, and instead maybe it'll just be, we'll develop language around different styles and techniques.
Yeah, I think we're so far along in our society, capitalist society, that we want everything to fit in a pre-existing box. And if given the opportunity, I could see kombucha having a regionality like beer has or like wine has, based on different areas and how their local practices are, whether they're based on water, whether they're based on available teas. But now that the fact that with like tea, everything is available to everyone all the time. So that's why I want to get into kind of what you guys, the biggest reason why I've always admired what you guys do is your super love of like locality. And I find that you guys are proudly Southern in the sense that you want to express that, like, just like kombucha, which despite being a mixed culture fermentation, it has become a monoculture as far as branding of kombucha. You guys take like the South and have shown me personally, like as a guy from California who has been dismissive in the past of like regionality and of like the crazy amount of food and culture coming out of what is just broadly called the South, and seeing what you guys do, whether it's through foraging or how you use your ingredients, has really helped show me that there's like a lot of really cool stuff happening down there. So that's a big reason why I've been wanting to talk to you guys. And I know that your take on ingredients has picked up some fans. You know, you talked about Noma. If we're on the subject of like well-known chefs and restaurants, Sean Brock has been a supporter of your guys'. I believe I've seen you, and he's from what's his restaurant? The Husk.
Right?
Yeah. So
yeah.
He's using some of your guys' pickles, or has in the past?
He has in the past. Yeah. So he's actually, he has, I believe he's sold Husk. He might still be on as like an advisor, but he's sort of launched an entirely new restaurant group, and he's opening, I believe, 3 or 4. I know of 3 restaurants and potentially 4 in Nashville. And so he's sort of on this new chapter, and he actually hired Jason White, who was working in Noma's fermentation lab. He brought Jason White on as like head of R&D for his new restaurant group. And so in the past, he has used our krauts, and that was a really exciting moment for us. Right now, we don't have any projects in the works with him, but I hope that maybe after the virus has settled down and the restaurant community is recovered, maybe we'll be able to continue that relationship.
I think Sean taught us, he showed us that we could believe in ourselves and what we make. And he spoke very highly of our products, and that showed me that what I'm trying to say is Sean's support showed us that we should make our ferments into food in our tap room. So we developed a small plates menu for our tap room, and it really illustrated to us, like, we're not a company that needs to make pickles or kraut and sell it across the East Coast. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. That's a great job. And we've done it, not East Coast, but like Southern, like we've done wide distribution kraut kimchi stuff, but it's a very challenging job, and it's not where our hearts are. And speaking of the Bay Area, we've always looked up to Cultured Pickle Shop in Berkeley, and they're definitely such a mature business, but also really just inspired like an entire generation. And their pickling is a beautiful reflection of California, and they're very talented people. So that's more along the lines of where we want to take pickling. And when we say pickling, we say pickling is a broad stroke of, you know, a pickle in our common language is like a cucumber pickle, which is great, but that's a cucumber pickle. So when we say pickling, we're like pickling cabbage, or pickling green tomatoes, or pickling eggplant, or pickling whatever. So
yeah, and yeah, so
I've never been there.
Yeah, Tamara's pointing out we haven't been to Cultured, which you've been yelling at me for a year plus to go.
When this all settles, we'll go up there.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, they're 20 years in to their practice, which is incredible.
So we've had more Cultured Pickle Shop pickles than y'all have. Yeah, we have friends who fly them back out here, and it's just really delicious. I mean, we just finished a green tomato kimchi that they make. They make really incredible like Japanese style pickles outside of that as well. So like really traditional techniques.
Can you speak a little bit about using heirloom varieties? And because, you know, I am very kind of interested in like using local ingredients, but beyond local, just not just what grows local, but what is indigenous or is local. And because I know, Pete, you've done some stuff with fermentation beyond what you do with harvesters, but also in your home brewing and some of the other projects where you've incorporated. I know you guys both have a lot of experience with foraging. That is something that I think is missing, or I think is maybe the next step in food and beverage, is a fierce locality and if you're going to use invasive species, for example, it's like you're actually doing it to tame those invasive species by like, okay, let's actually like pick this, use it, but also having a focus of what is actually grown here. Like we have a local Native American chef who is recreating recipes from he is a member of the local tribe here in, I believe, like the Berkeley area, like with the indigenous people of this land. And he's actually creating like using like chestnuts and other things that were before a lot of these species, plant species were invasive species were introduced. So, where did you guys like learn how to forage? Like that's something I want to know more about. And like, what can you recommend for people who want to learn about foraging and heirloom varieties?
Yeah, I feel like foraging and heirloom varieties it's two broad discussions, but I totally get where you're coming from in the locality discussion. I feel like it harkens back for us, outside of an ecological standpoint. I feel like it harkens back to the fact that we could have started this business in a lot of different places besides rural Alabama. And that we chose to stay here with great pride for where we are, where we're from and who we are. But that also entailed a deeper look at what surrounds us. We say that we are, one of our core tenets is community. And we say it's community, yes, both human, but also microbially. So it's a whole picture look at who we are and where we're from. And I think that foraging was just an extension of that perspective. And the literal answer, not the philosophical one, I learned to forage. Where do you learn to forage?
Well,
Neptune?
So we were farming. We started out as a farm, and we were both farming and fermenting at one point in our history. And we started this business with $800, which I would not recommend ever to anyone again. But because of that, and like our ties to agriculture, and being scrappy entrepreneurs with little capital, like all of those things sort of came together, and I think developed a foraging practice for myself, like wanting to do it as a way to like maximize abundance in our fermentation practice, utilizing what's around us, not having to like invest a lot of money into it to return a profit, and then also exploring like the flavor components. And so I think being close to the earth by farming just like sort of lended itself to all of those things. And and so I think, I would recommend if someone wants to start foraging, I think if you just pick a plant or two that you've heard of and that you're interested in, and just like start noticing where it grows, like, try harvesting it from a clean source, eating it once you have a proper ident on it, and just like developing a relationship. And I feel like it's one of those things that's like a snowball effect. It like feels like intangible to develop a repertoire around foraging, but if you just start and slowly start building those relationships with plants, I feel like it just starts to snowball, and it becomes easier to identify where things grow. And we're very good, us humans are very good at patterns and finding patterns and replicating them, and I feel like that applies to foraging.
It's probably because of foraging.
Yeah.
But I mean, to
evolutionarily.
What's that?
Evolutionarily,
yeah,
it's
straight up.
That.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because they're just like homies at some point. There's people may have a conception, without a conception of plants and where they grow, it seems like a big mumble jumble, right? But in fact, there's actually patterns. There is successions. There's like certain way plants grow in certain successions. So, when you we always talk about, and microbially too, we always talk about if you have a mowed pasture and you're to stop mowing it, what happens is they're the things that first grow and they grow quickest. So in our home, it's like tulip poplar and like pine trees come up very quickly. And only later down the line do a lot of the harder woods come up. So to relate it to fermentation, when you start your beer and it's a mixed culture, let's say it's like literally like for real, a spontaneous beer, there's certain ways that microbes secession themselves out, right? And we can start to understand patterns in that way.
Did you happen to see Michael Pollan's Netflix version of his book Cooked?
Yes.
And he talks with in the episode about fermentation and with cheese, they go in and they look at like cheese and then they zoom out and they show forest or they show like a meadow, and they literally talk about the same thing where they're saying like the first thing that grows up is this, and then it dies off and it leaves basically it sets the table for the next thing because that is the food source for the next, or if you're looking at like brewing books specifically covering lambic and spontaneous fermentation, is there's a bunch of bell curves that follow each other. They're staggered bell curves because once this comes up, like this microbe comes up, it puts out all these precursors. It up X amount of oxygen. It leaves this amount of acidity, and that sets the perfect environment for the next one behind it as those cells are dying off. And
it's just not that different. Like
if you see, and then around 18 months, so with like lambic, around 18 months, it all kind of plateaus. And so I can imagine that when you go to like Forage and you're looking at like a young, an area like in the foothills, it's just, that it's like, you can look at it and know that it's pretty young versus you go to an old growth forest and you kind of know what to look for.
Totally. Yeah. That's exactly it. And I think that's just really poetic. It's very nice. And you don't go hunt ramps in a clear cut,
I will say too, I had forgotten that Michael Pollan sort of used that analogy in the show. But we've also been using that analogy for 5 or 6 years now. And when I saw him talk about it, I was like, oh, like I felt like really smart for a second.
Yeah, we're so
like
validated.
Really validated. Yeah.
Validated, yeah, for sure. So besides obviously Harvest Roots is your guys' main hustle. And I know that, Pete, we're going to talk about your home brewing and both of your guys' many hobbies. I have a whole section about all your hobbies and how you have too many hobbies.
I'll have something to say when you ask me about home brewing though. Okay,
we're going to get into that. But Lindsay, you're also a doula.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe I'm projecting this out, but you guys have always come across as super warm people that are just very, your approach to food, your approach to fermentation is like a nourishing aspect. And I feel like that translates with your also being a doula, like you're looking to like, it's like taking care of another person. Like you can do that via food or you can do that via attention and like care.
That's super kind of you. That's very sweet. Yeah. So when we were farming, I got super interested in birth work and just like female reproductive health. And I did a doula training here in Birmingham with this cool nonprofit that basically they provide free doula training, and in exchange, once you complete the training, you provide free doula services for low-income women in the community. And so I completed the training and completed all of like the births to sort of pay for my training. And that I've attended 8 births total, but I'm no longer practicing right now just because Harvest Roots is my main focus. But I will say that work taught me so much. And I think a lot of the lessons that I learned in being present at birth are applicable to all aspects of life, like just deep listening and what empathy actually means. Like I thought empathy was apologizing, but it's actually not apologizing. It's the opposite of that. It's just being present with someone's experience and not necessarily jumping to fix that for them. And anyways, I think those are great life skills, and I hope one day I can return to that work. Actually, the last birth that I attended was for a friend, and we were setting up to vend for a film festival, and it was like a really big event for us. And my client went into labor, and I was like, I have to go, Pete, like, sorry. Like, and so that was the last birth I did. And I was like, I just need to focus on harvest roots. It's not fair to my business partner and life partner, and like also not fair to like any potential clients, at this time. So yeah.
It's really cool.
I've noticed with, at least with Pete, who's a little more active on social media, that you guys, I feel like you guys are probably both in the same boat, that supporting people's creative endeavors. And that's where when I say that I feel like you guys come across as like kind of genuine, caring people, it's because I see support. Even if it's just via social media. So like we have never met in person, but Pete and I have had a lot of conversations in private, and even through that, I've learned more about you, Lindsay, and like it seems like you guys are really good at like helping support people's creative endeavors. Is that something that you guys learned through, like you said, being a doula? Is that something that is that something you have to like be conscious of and like practice? Is it a practice, or do you feel like that is just like kind of led you guys down this path of like creativity of your own, whether it's the hobbies we're going to get into or creating, harvest roots?
I feel like it's both a practice, and I think also inherent in us as individuals, if that makes sense. Like I think starting your own business, you realize how hard it is and how important it is to like support those in your entrepreneurial like ecosystem, because you know what they're going through. But I also think it's a practice too, because there are moments where I feel like the business sort of takes all of my focus, and I'm not trying to be selfish, but I feel sort of insular and selfish in that act. And I have to sort of remind myself to sort of step out and remember to support those around me, and to look. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I think of community. I think a community like soil. I also think that we wouldn't be much of anywhere without the kind of support that we've gotten. So like, it's also just if you harvest a plant from the garden and you harvest its fruits, like you need to put compost, you need to like return nutrients into that system. And that's just what we believe in.
Well, I can tell you that when I was at Antidote after Carnival last year, I don't remember if you were. I don't know if you remember that I was texting you, and I had commented about you in front of like all the post Carnival Britannomyces people who had left Amsterdam and gone to Belgium. We were at the farm, and everybody, including Tom from Antidote, was saying that they wished that you guys both were there, because you guys have always been so positive with other people in the, I guess you could say, mixed culture community. So it shows. I want you guys to know that.
I feel like the mixed culture community is much more supportive of each other than, say, just the beer industry.
The general beer industry.
Yeah. We all love microbes, I guess, right? And in communities and
it's hard to not get heady about it though. It's hard, and you're not going to make good mixed culture fermentations if you aren't philosophical, and like if you aren't more open about art, about the sort of, the magic quality, that we talk about. Like, that's where I came to the beer community, and what I see the beer community as is what you're saying. Like, well, excuse me, what I heard you when you originally said mixed culture community was that includes coffee, that includes cheese, that includes yogurt. And we don't have much interest in, definitions between these things. It's just different. It's techniques applied to a medium. And once you understand those techniques and you embrace, I think something that's missing from a lot of beer is embracing what you don't know. And I think that my favorite brewers and fermenters in general are the people who, it's almost like just enough. It's almost like where does, when I'm writing a fucking poem, like where do the words come from, and that's interesting to me. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think what you're saying is like, you can study, whatever your area of expertise is, but at some point you're just getting back to like, now you have like almost that muscle memory. Like if you have a concept that you want to execute, you have enough theory and knowledge, just enough to say like, okay, now I can tackle that. But theory and knowledge can only get you so far. Execution and risk and all those things that are a little bit beyond that is what actually it takes to like achieve like a complete project or product.
Yeah, and I definitely am not a staunch like fuck science kind of thing. I've evolved out of that, I admit. And by fuck science, I mean like in terms of fermentation and like embracing knowing what Brett strain is present in your fucking goose, like or your goose inspired beer, or whatever. I think that's really important, and it's been something that I've learned over time, and it's helped us make a better product in our own fermentations. And yeah, I feel like I'm still learning and developing through those feelings like all the time.
So let's talk about some of your other fermentations. You do have some homebrew. You were starting a project called Nest, and you said that I'm calling it homebrew, but it sounds like maybe it could potentially be something down the line, another commercial project, you think, or do you think it'll keep it as homebrew?
I think, bar any pandemic, yeah, so I'm not interested in brewing beer. I had to come to terms with that. At this time, I'm just not. I'm really interested in like the ready-made. Like, I know that's such a cliche, but I like things coming to me in a set way. Like, for instance, I was thinking about this recently because we are doing a project with who we call our art director for our new tap room and production space, Doug Belos. And we went to like rural Alabama junk stores and are junking all of our plates and bowls and wares for the tap room. And the important thing to articulate though is that it's not like arbitrary just BS. These are like coordinated decisions. These are aesthetic decisions. There's nothing about junking that says that it can't be conscious or nuanced. There's to find what's already there, and call that foraging, call that spontaneous fermentation. This idea of what's already there. So it's not finding 50 plates and there's 50 different ones. Like we're finding like 25 to 30 specific plates and bowls that have a specific weight, and the relationship between what plates and beer and wanting to be a blendery. I think I just was trying to illustrate I like things coming in. I also believe that brewing beer is different than blending, so much so that you should focus on what you're good at. And I know it looks like I have a lot of hobbies, and I have, but over the past couple of years, I've become a big believer. Linz has not had this issue, but as an Aquarius with the Capricorn cusp sitch, I've really had to struggle with having too many hobbies. And so
you're trying to work with your community to like someone else is brewing the beer for you, and right. You want to focus your efforts on.
I want to focus my efforts on the agriculture, the foraging, the expressions of, the best painting I ever made was on a thrift store canvas, and I tried everything else, but the best painting I ever made was on that canvas from a guy gave it to me out of like a thrift store.
So Nest has been, so originally, let's, to give people context, we were, all four of us were supposed to go to Carnival Britannia-Macies this year in Amsterdam. Before this pandemic hit, we had all basically come to terms with the fact that financially that wasn't going to be super viable. But originally, I was still organizing the homebrew market from here, and Nest, your homebrew project, was lined up originally to be part of that. And in talking with you about it, my understanding is that you're working with breweries that are creating wort, whether you are working with them on the base recipe or not, but you are taking some of that wort home and working on that, and you're managing fermentation, you're managing secondary additions, whether they're fruit, herbal, etc., and then blending. Do you think that Nest would be something that is a commercial operation down the line, or do you want to keep that as homebrew?
No, yeah, we have a really funny habit of like, we were making pizza last night and I was like tense because it sucked. And I was like, I'm in this headspace where I'm just like, this is not marketable. Like, we cannot send this out into the world. And Linz was like, yo, dude, we're making pizza at home. Like, take a chill pill. And so in regards,
endeavor.
What's that?
Not everything is a business endeavor.
So I think that's like,
I'm the worst capitalist ever. It sucks. It's like
learning that not every hobby has to be a business, but
that's banjo for me though. So scratch that off your list.
Yeah, okay. I'm replacing banjo off the hobby list.
Yeah, but I do think I feel like, I think we also want to explore alcoholic kombucha, but I think that I'll speak for Pete and say that I think there is a vision in the distant future for an alcohol-based project that is outside of Harvest Roots, but brings in a lot of our core values in an alcohol format. So
yeah, the future project would be a restaurant with a barrel program. So like a microbe forward restaurant, like fermented foods. But I'll just push back. Like it's the same microbes in this kombucha that are in my alcohol. And it's just not that different to me anymore. Like, I won't say that out loud, but, I was going to make like a drug reference, but I didn't.
Right, but
yeah,
well, just so you know, no one will be offended.
Yeah, Nest is something that we would love to bring into the fold. I mean, I'm talking like no more than 300 or 400 barrels a year for a fucking pizza restaurant, like kind of thing. But right now it's very much a tiny little project, and Nest is about Alabama ecology, doggedly, like stubbornly principled, which I've had to learn how to have a relationship with that sort of with where principles have to bend and be malleable in business. And I like the idea of a place of no compromise. And if you close, you close. I think that's not what we do with Harvest Roots, but I want to engage in that in some point in life.
What can you tell us about Biscuit Church?
So I make biscuits on Sunday morning for Lynn, so she stays with me.
Yeah, it's hanging on a thread.
Yeah. Biscuit Church is I had this art project a long time ago called Pete's Bible Company, and I made Bibles out of like blocks of wood, and it was like a fictional like thing where, you know, it was about a family from rural Alabama who made Bibles, like handmade oak Bibles. And yeah, it was, you know, a lot of what we do, I'll just speak for myself, but a lot of what I do is a coping mechanism for where I've come from, and trying to relate that to who I am, and like work on how much tension there is between the two. And I think, you know, Biscuit Church is a person who I'm familiar with, who talks like that, who writes like that, who is a deep believer in God. You know, the only person Biscuit Church follows is Jesus on Instagram. And yeah, it's a coping mechanism, but that's totally like fun and silly. I don't take that seriously, but I do take biscuits pretty seriously. The only reason I started doing biscuits, in contrast to like bread and pizza dough, which I personally have swore off never doing, like I'll never do that. The only reason I make biscuits is because I've made them for a long time, and my mom used to make them on Sunday morning, so I would go to church. And there's a nostalgia, there's something in me that can not have to work too hard to bring that kind of like delicious food into our lives. It's not a stretch. I have hobbies where I have to work too hard, and I'm done with those hobbies. Like I'm done with that.
So can you really quickly explain why nobody's making biscuits during this pandemic? And everyone's making biscuits? Well, besides us, why are most people doing sourdough?
So I think sourdough, I think no one's making. Okay, so we're in the midst of a pandemic where everyone's like sharing their exciting sourdough projects, which is awesome. But I just felt like no one was making biscuits. And I think people weren't making biscuits because biscuits are hard as shit to make. And everyone's like, they're easy. It's like, well, then I have a lot of words that want to come out of my mouth right now. But like, I just think that's a disservice. I think what is easy? Like if you've resigned. If you think something's easy, then you aren't there to push yourself or the technique. And biscuits aren't easy. Like that's not.
Biscuits aren't easy, but neither's proper sourdough bread.
No. Oh God, no.
Some of the loaves I'm seeing are a little. They're interesting.
Let's give it some context. Tamara graduated from the Culinary Institute of America in St. Helena, in Napa Valley, and she's a professional trained baker, worked in the industry, and we couldn't find flour and yeast and other things at our grocery store.
I still can't find whole wheat flour.
Yeah. So
I had to fight.
And
to
now
find
now we're seeing all these social media posts of people baking and their loaves don't look good. And I just want to make good bread and I can't because everyone's making crap bread. She won't admit it, but that's what it is.
I'm a little confused because I see that people aren't slashing the top of their bread so it can rise properly. I will give a shout out to our best friend Bobby. His loaves are dope.
But also Jamie.
Jamie's are great. They're coming along. Yes, Jamie and Bobby's loaves are great, and they're coming along beautifully. Like, they've put a lot of hard work into understanding their bread.
Frustrated baker here.
And their yeast. Yes. Like, you have to understand your starter, and, you know, bread, kind of like sour beer, tells you when it's done.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention and, like, understand what's happening to your loaves. But also the same with biscuits. You have to understand that, you know, you need cold butter. You need, like... You can't just like throw things together and then.
But I feel like biscuits is part of the whole dismissive
Southern
quality of like it's Southern, it's
like,
dumb, it's simple, and that's what goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is like you guys have taught me like Southern does not mean simple. It's simple in the sense of like Italian food is simple. You have to it's very few ingredients and it's very high quality ingredients. And so in that sense, it's simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah. I feel like as a region in the South, we spoke about this with our friend Doug Belos, who's a really incredible artist. He was talking about how he feels like Southerners are always having to embellish and like add lots of extra things to their practice, be it like extra sugar or extra fat or extra salt, like because we feel like we're not worthy enough to be simple, and that whatever practice we have, you know, it's just not worthy in its simplicity. But I think in the exploration of biscuits with our mentor Scott Peacock, like I feel like he really challenges that notion because it's one of the most simple biscuit practices I've ever seen. And the results are phenomenal. Like I, was hesitant to believe that his version of biscuit could like change my whole notion of biscuits, but it did. And it was just through simple techniques and really high quality ingredients.
It was pretty profound.
Yeah.
It was crazy. We all have, it's like when you watch Geo Dreams of Sushi, you're like, how can 3 ingredients make you cry? Or so, like how that's why I really take offense to anyone saying anything's easy almost, I don't think there's an absolute there, but like we hear, it's, and I brought this up in our discussion, but like, that's like the dad with their kid at MoMA and they're like, oh, look at this Agnes Martin painting. Like, my son could paint that. It's stripes of like pink and desert blues. It's like, great. Okay, cool. Like, did you think that of how long it took to distill simplicity? I think that there's myriad of cultures and foods that show us like what simplicity is and how much of a lifelong practice that is, so we're definitely not alone in the South, but it has its own distinct context and background for sure. For sure.
So there was a couple of other hobbies I was going to get into, skating, videography, training. You told me to cross off banjo. So maybe we'll have to do an episode 2 just to cover some of these. But before we finish up, can you guys just tell us one more time where everyone can find Harvest Roots, and also anything you guys are promoting? You guys are doing these Instagram live events. Do you have any more of those coming up?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we have one coming up this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Central.
Or maybe next Thursday.
Or next Thursday?
I don't know. It depends on our email we're waiting on.
Okay. So we're changing up our format a little bit. So our series is called Don't Waste It, Pickle It. And we are actually going to be inviting some guests onto our future events. And
secret big guests.
And so we're waiting to hear back from this one big secret guest that we're really excited about. And so stay tuned for that. We have a couple more planned, and
we got to talk about the tap room.
Yeah, do that real fast.
We gotta administer some propaganda. We gotta sprinkle it on a little bit more evenly through this podcast. I'm talking about philosophically about like fungus and stuff. Like we're working on it over here.
You need to make some money, bro.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you guys are having a kombucha tap room.
Thank you.
So do you all feel like that happens in your area? Do you go to those things? Like, is that
it doesn't happen here yet.
We don't have one. I mean,
but I think it would
bars incorporate it.
Yeah, there's people who are incorporating kombucha slowly, but I think that your guys' approach as far as also doing a lot of food, where I saw you were playing with dehydrated kimchi powder. That sounds awesome. I would love to play with that on even like I made steak tacos last night. I would totally do steak tacos with kimchi powder.
It'd be so good.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
So,
how can you, I mean, it's just like, it's just fail. I mean, I think that Lindsay and I have just been engaging in like, so the premise for the tap room and the production space is we have a 5,000 square foot brewery, and we have 3,500 in kombucha production, bar any unprecedented godly events that are happening as we speak. But not that we're going to close, but just if things shift. But we have a tap room that we're really excited about. And, you know, like I brought up earlier, like Sean Brock, his like even small gestures of support was just like, I mean, y'all, we are in a 300 person town in rural Alabama. Like, you know, we felt very, very encouraged that he would look at us and taste our product. And when you're a small business and you're pouring your heart out, that kind of support is really, really heavy fuel. And so in the tap room, we're very excited to have a small plates menu. So it's a small menu, and it's 5 items. And the premise is that we don't have a hood. We don't have a grease trap. We don't need that legally. We want to do probably about 70% of the cooking in fermentation in our pickling program in the back. So there's not a lot of preparation. It's very simple food. It's going to be very simple ingredients that are extremely well grown. Whether it's from Anson Mills, and we're getting like heirloom rice, or peas or beans from our friends in Alabama, the gesture is going to be a place, you know, we really want people to come to our space. And I think that, you know, I think that people are going to feel like this is the last place in the world this should be happening. And it is going to happen here. You know, I think that we're going to be articulating something, and we have a lot of heart behind it. And we'll have 15 taps of kombucha for the menu as well. So the one cool thing is that we started our business by making like really, really gnarly kombucha, like really delicious stuff that was really like pine needle kombucha and stuff is always one we say. Like we had pine needle kombucha and autumn olive kombucha like way before we ever made a ginger kombucha. And we realized that you have to sort of do one before the other.
Or even you have to expand. You have to expand your offerings to include a wider audience when you're trying to grow your business. And so we're excited though, because the tap room will give us the place to, you know, have 15 taps of kombucha, and we can have the fruity guys for like people that enjoy that, and I enjoy it too. But also we can have the black walnut whole kombucha, like, or, you know, just like whatever. So
it's going to be a place where we get to finally explore a lot of ideas, and the food menu is super exciting to us. You know, like kombucha syrups, just having toast that our sauerkraut's on. Like, it's not hard food, but it's all food that we want you to feel better when you leave than when you walked in. It's in that the food is nourishing. To your point, Tim.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. I'm gonna edit this a little bit. We'll get it up in the next day or so. Anybody who's interested, please just check out Harvest Roots. Check out Biscuit Church.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Come on. Check out Nest.
Check out
Nest Homebrew.
She's telling me to stop.
Yeah.
I want to funnel. I'm funneling right now. This is what it looks like when an art student tries to market. No, for real though. Like, we appreciate your time today, man. It's nice hanging out with you all. And Harvest Roots on Instagram is
thank you guys.
I really hope we can come visit. Like,
we're gonna make it happen
please.
whether we fund you guys coming here or we go there.
Not in the summer.
Yeah, she doesn't want to go to the south in the summer. Sorry.
Yeah,
I don't.
But that's that swimming season, girl.
Moonshining, swimming.
End of summer, maybe.
That's all that happens here, you know. Like, you're
yeah,
right.
that's the South, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so hot.
All right. Thank you guys.